Gender communication for speech 1321 organizational and professional communication course led by Professor Ruth McDonald and of course myself, Levila Leiato. What is gender communication? Gender co- Gender communication is defined as a specific communication that focuses on the difference of how men and women communicate amongst one another. Gender communication are also gender barriers to communication that can incite problems at home and in the workplace. Societal stereotypes, assumed gender roles, and interpersonal differences can contribute to a communication gap between the sexes. Men and women have assigned roles in society that exacerbate to the gender divide. It is important to remember, however, that not all men and women fit into a labeled category. Recognizing the common differences and similarities is a first step towards creating understanding. What are some examples that can help us understand gender communication? Here, I will be able to provide you a good and better understanding of using three different examples that can help us or help you get a good knowledge of what gender communication is. The first example of gender communication that I've chosen is nonverbal communication. Nonverbal communication um, between men and women. Women use their body language and facial expressions to show the person who is communicating with them. They also believe that nonverbal communication demonstrates to the other person that they understand and is listening fully. This nonverbal signal may be a smile, a head nod, or even a direct eye contact. When men are listening to others, they tend to remain still, which of course can often interpret as an absence of nonverbal affirmation from men and disinterest in the conversation, a lack of understanding, or even an effort to negate what is being communicated. Of course, when men do that to women, we often repeat ourselves. With that, they provide more clarification or to entice the man to engage. Men then feel annoyed with this, or they may even interpret the women's behavior as weak or lacking in confidence. Second example is relationships. Relationships in gender communication, women are focused on relationships and men are focused on tasks. Generally, women prefer to first develop a relationship and then use that relationships to work collaboratively. Men experience frustration with this method. Generally, men use tasks as means to connect with others. The differences between the two approaches effectively establishes a gender barrier between men and women in how they communicate. Task-oriented communication versus relationship-oriented communication may be exaggerated when conflict arises. Then, women are inclined to discuss conflict in an effort to preserve the relationship. As for men, they tend to internalize conflict, discarding the effect it may have on the relationship. Women's natural inclination to be empathic instead of analytical deepens the divide. Third example is when it comes to decision making process. When it comes to decision making, there are many styles which creates a barrier in gender communication. Women are process oriented and prefer to gather information, where men rely on product driven communication style. When an issue arises in the workplace, a female leader is likely to seek the advice of other colleagues. A male leader may view this as a weakness and may believe that a leader should be able to make the decision on his own without consultation. Similarly, simi- Similarly, women prefer to discuss issues verbally, whereas men tend to process internally. A woman may interpret silence from a man as disinterest in the issue or as a disengagement from the group. So, of course, those were three great examples um, to give us an understanding of what gender communication is. Nonverbal communication um, gave us an insight of women using facial expressions and body language as a way to communicate with the male figure. As for male figure, they don't rely on body language or facial expressions. And they just completely stand still, and it makes us as women feel like they're not interested in the conversation or interested in what we're talking about to them. Relationships, on how we approach it, men and women are different. And when it comes to decision making, It's a whole different ballgame, especially in the business world or in the workplace environment. When women have to rely on things, men see it as weakness, while men feel like they're more independent. They don't need to rely on anyone, so they rather make the decision on their own intent, in uh, their own mind. Sorry. So now we've come to chapter 11, um, gender communication. Here, I chose out of the section in this chapter, I chose three to discuss in my slideshow. First one is interplay of sex and gender. Second is feminism versus feminism. And the third one is, are there really differences in gender communication style? So the first one is interplay of sex and gender. You see the breakdown of sex, of course, in biology and science, even in sociology and psychology, we know that the sex of the fetus is determined at the time of conception. Common chromosomes patterns such as XX equals females and XY equals males. Third, refers to biologically defined and genetically acquired differences between male and females, according to their physiology and reproductive capabilities or potentialities. It is universal and mostly unchanging without surgeries. Next comes to gender. Refers to the economic, social, and political cultural attributes and opportunities associated with being women and men. The social definition of what it means to be a woman or a man vary among cultures and change over time. Gender is a social cultural expression of particular characteristics and roles that are associated with certain groups of people with differences to their sex and sexuality. The next section of chapter 11 is feminism versus feminism. In the feminism world, there are approximately 13 different types, but because it's a project and there's a time limit, I'm gonna explain the four main types of feminism, or the four most common main types of feminism. Here are the four main types, or the most common feminism that is known today in society. One is difference feminism. Second is liberal feminism. Third is Marxist feminism. And the last one, radical feminism. Difference feminism. Difference feminism speaks on the difference between a man and a woman. Another name for difference feminism is essential feminism. According to this perspective, one difference with scientific evidence is that women are instinctively more nurturing than men, which is true. I mean, if we look at a mother's perspective, a mother is more nurturing to their children than the fathers. The fathers are typically the ones that are more the one at work, supporting the family, providing and bringing in the income that helps pay the bills in the house, while the mother is at home nurturing their child or children, caring for them, feeding them, clothing them, bathing them, practically raising them. So here it varies with the separate but equal perspective that men and women have innate differences, but are to receive equal treatment. And equality feminists would argue that men and women should get the same treatment in all areas of life, which is work, home, and socially. The next one that we'll speak on right now is liberal feminism. Liberal feminism seeks equality within the law in areas such as education and employment. Societies should treat people accordingly to merit and ensure fair competition for jobs resources. The main aim is to eradicate stereotypes in the media, education, and etc. Um, the strength that I've seen during the research on liberal feminism that there are also enormous contributors to the emancipation of women. Liberal feminism are still considered radical in some countries that doesn't offer basic rights to women, which improves the quality of life due to educational and legal reforms. The liberal feminism's weakness is failed to recognize that working class women and black women have barriers when it comes to advancement, especially in the workspace or education. Third is Marxist feminism. Feminism emphasizes importance of social class. Women not only exploited on a gender basis, but also based on class. Uh, Marxist feminism looks at how capitalism affects women's position in society and has greatly contributed to our understanding of how women work. Um, a lot of fallbacks on being a Marxist feminism is heavy reliance on economic analysis, unable to explain the following existence, such as rape, female infanticide, and domestic violence. All of these fails to explain why women occupy low status employment as capitalism would still benefit the male workers paid low. Okay. Our third types of feminism is radical feminism that we're also used to seeing uh, having protests, such as these women here on the right. Radical feminism seek alternative social structures for women. They also believe in equality, inequality, I apologize, exists due to biological differences between men and women. Um, Radical feminism made women work more clear and visible, clearly highlighting the exploitation of women in society. And the only fallback is that they don't analyze the way social class interacts with patriarchy. And last but not least, are there really differences in gender communication style? Yes. Differences in gender communication style, both men and women are likely to exhibit different types of communication. Men are prone to be report talkers, which is a style of communication that is driven by exchange of factual information to solve given problem. This type of communication is usually direct and typically does not include any personal uh, anecdotes or stories. Uh, there's limited of emotional connotation, and this type of communication is aimed at building relationship based on solving that task at hand. Women are more like rapper, rapper talkers, which is style of communication which is driven by the exchange of factual information to solve any given problem. This type of communication is also usually direct and typically does not include any personal anecdotes or stories. And I feel like I think I made a little mistake. So let me see, rapper talkers. Okay, and this brings me to the end of my slideshow. Um, I hope that I was able to give you a good understanding of gender communications between both male and female, uh, and to know that uh, the differences within just this main topic give you an idea with examples and just going over some of the sections in this chapter that were real interesting to me that I felt I need to share. Um, Thank you for watching my video and listening to my slideshow, and have a great evening and a safe holiday.